We were young until we weren't, but the books stay the same. Rereading our favorite books.
Kind of alluded to this, I think, a few times now, but this narrative is it's really got its blinders on, where it's really focused on this one thing it wants to say, or preach, really. And it doesn't necessarily allow for other viewpoints to enter in and have a discussion. So there might be something that's kind of introduced on the side, but then it gets quickly stamped out. Nickabrick brings up points, like really good points, about how the dwarves were treated by the old regime, and then he gets murdered. Which kind of maybe proves his point a little bit, but the narrative doesn't even discuss that.
While we're back on Nickabrick, there was something I'd forgotten to bring up earlier. After Nickabrick has been murdered, Caspian says, "I am sorry for Nickabrick, though he hated me from the first moment he saw me. He had gone sour inside from long suffering and hating. If we had won quickly, he might have become a good dwarf in the days of peace. I don't know which of us killed him. I'm glad of that." So it's so weird, because we're given Nickabrick as this antagonist the whole time, and he gets murdered. And then it's like the understanding that, yeah, Nickabrick was the way he was because of the situation. Like, maybe they could have, like, gone into this more with him being alive, but instead it's like a posthumous realization.
I know. Remember what I was saying last time about how C.S. Lewis has this bad habit of adding these, like, addendums at the last minute? This is exactly what I mean. The narrative decides, oh, actually, this is something interesting and we should address it. But at this point, it's just too late. He's dead.
Indeed.
There's no chance to actually work with Nickabrick. Because that would have been interesting if Caspian actually had to work with Nickabrick and develop a relationship and really, like, convince him to come to his side. Maybe they could have learned from each other a little bit, and maybe they could have learned to be more respectful about each other. And, you know, Nickabrick, he is the super racist one in this book. He has a thing against, like, dwarves who breed with humans, and he definitely hates humans in general. So it would have been cool to see him rehabilitate that kind of perspective. But then Caspian to also acknowledge, hey, people have done you a lot of wrong, and, like, I understand why you feel the way you do. Let's work together to sort of start healing those scars.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that, like, Nickabrick's hatred for people that are, you know, half human, half dwarf, or anything else, is he feels they've betrayed the native Narnians by trying to, like,
to pass.
Blend in. Yeah, to pass.
Because there's a very interesting detail about how they talk about, like, they wear, like, platform shoes or whatever to try to, like, increase their height. And, yeah, so there's, like, this very interesting topic of, like, what it means to pass and what it means to sort of assimilate with, you know, the quote-unquote enemy. But it does get resolved, and the way it's resolved is just, like, by murdering Nickabrick, because it's just inconvenient, really, to the narrative. This book.
Yep. But on the upside, this book introduces the best character, I will argue, in the Narnia universe, and that is Reepicheep.
Reepicheep the mouse.
Reepicheep is the best, and I'm so pumped that we will be seeing him again in the next book. And just, like, okay, my Reepicheep notes are literally, the first one is just Reepicheep in all caps.
You should describe this character for people who don't know him.
Reepicheep. Okay.
He is, like, basically a mouse musketeer.
Yes.
But he's so over the top. It's comical because he's so small, but he's so aggressive, and he's
like, my honor, Zuko.
Honor, 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 the honor, 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 honorary honor, the honor. Honor?
And he's always challenging people to duels and threatening to poke people with his little tiny sword if they besmirch his honor. And it's just so darn adorable.
It is the cutest. And you know what? He's actually pretty effective in the battle at the end because him and his little mouse gang,
It's actually kind of horrifying.
yeah, they're like maiming people.
They poke them in the foot, they fall over, and then they just literally stab them to death with these, like, needles, you know? It's like,
Yeah.
oh my god, this is terrible, but it's so fun.
Right, and Reepicheep is not scared of anyone, and it's great because in the end, his tail's been cut off, and so he like petitions Aslan to like repair his tail, and he actually debates with Aslan. Like Aslan's like, "You're too proud. Like, don't worry about it. It's just a tail." And then like his entire gang of mice are like, "We too will cut off our tails in solidarity." Also, I think. Yes, here we go. Permit me to remind you that a very small size has been bestowed upon us mice, and if we did not guard our dignity, some, who weigh worth by inches, would allow themselves very unsuitable pleasantries at our expense. And that's why he wants his freaking tail back. In the end, he changes Aslan's mind, and Aslan's like, "You have conquered me. You have great hearts."
I love that moment. Okay, so this is actually something I want to talk about, because one reason why I hate Aslan so much is that he appears and everyone is just entranced by him. And to me, having read the Bible and being very familiar with the stories, if you look at the earlier books, you will see people constantly debating with God. I mean, Jacob literally wrestles an angel, and you have this idea of struggling with God, of debating with God, of challenging God even, and having this relationship that not adversarial, but it's not just set in stone that, well, I guess the 10 Commandments are set in stone, but there is wiggle room. There is allowance that you can challenge God and debate with him. Every time Aslan shows up here in these books, everyone just becomes so boring.
Oh, his lion's mane. Oh, his breath. Oh, he booped me on the nose. I'm so in love. Take me as that.
Actually, this is about Horse and His Boy, so apologies for going back. But there's a moment we didn't talk about in Horse and His Boy where Hwim?
Hwin.
Yeah, Hwin has seen Aslan, and she is so taken by his beauty that she literally says, "Lion, please eat me. I'd rather be eaten by you than to live at all."
That's not quite what she says. But yes, she is like, "I would rather be eaten by you than a lot of things."
No, she literally... Okay, hold on. I need to get my book.
Let's see if I can find it first.
Okay. Oh, God. This is... I need to read this line because when I read it the first time... Okay. No, this is literally what she says. "Please, you're so beautiful. You may eat me if you like. I'd sooner be eaten by you than fed by anyone else." She's not being saying eaten by anyone else.
Yeah.
Literally being fed by anybody else. And it's like, that is fucking horrifying. I don't want that blind kind of obedience to anyone. And to me, you know, I'm not a Bible scholar. I'm not a religious scholar. But my understanding is that it's not about blind obedience. There's a struggle there of working with God and even challenging God when you don't think what he's suggesting is right or fair. And Aslan has not been that until now, when Reepicheep has this actual conversation and manages to convince Aslan, hey, just do him a solid and repair Reepicheep's tail. So it's like, I appreciated that moment. Thank you, Reepicheep, for giving us that moment. And I do want to say that I think he was completely shafted when they were deciding who was going to observe the duel. So each side can pick 3 people to stand around the ring, basically to make sure everyone's sticking by the rules or whatever. And Reepicheep offers himself in service of this. And Peter just rejects him.
I am always pro Reba Cheap getting more anything, and I'm so excited to see him again in Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which he is a big part of.
Given what I've said about the adventuring that takes place in this story and how bored I am, I'm not looking forward to Voyage of the Dawn Treader because literally the word voyage is in the title.
I do think you'll like it more
I'm
because
worried.
they make more stops in interesting places. It's more of a like, I will say, like, I don't think there's as much. There is like an overarching plot thread that does follow through the story, but I think it's more about like they're voyaging on the ship, the Dawn Treader, and they like stop at various islands, and all of the islands are really different, and there's like crazy things that happen on the different islands. There's some of, I think, the creepiest moments in all of the Narnia books with some of these islands. I remember really enjoying it, and I think a lot of people agree it's objectively the best Narnia book. So
Okay.
I feel like it has potential for you to enjoy it. There is like some amount of like, yes, they are sailing on the sea, and you get to hear about them sailing on the sea, but like they stop on a bunch of different islands and do things.
All right, that is very reassuring to hear. But to get back to this book, something I do want to ask you is how does your crush on Ed hold up?
It holds up. Okay. I'm so glad that you brought this up because I feel like we truly got Edmund as the little shit he is in this book, and that's really what jives with me as a human being. Like, he does have like a line or two I'm not a big fan of, but for the most part, like, I love him being there and supporting Lucy. I think that is really important to me. He has, of course, the great line, which I'm just going to read because I've referenced it so many times, but he says, "Well, there's just this," said Edmund, speaking quickly and turning a little red. "When we first discovered Narnia a year ago, or 1,000 years ago, whichever it was Lucy who discovered it first, and none of us would believe her. I was the worst of the lot, I know. Yet she was right all along. Wouldn't it be fair to believe her this time?" Which is just such a great moment. And he's just so, like, sassy about everything he does. When she then wakes him up later to be like, "It's Aslan again, we gotta go," he says, "Oh, bother it all. I do wish you wouldn't keep on seeing things. But I suppose we'll have to wake the others." And so he's just so, like, grumpy and annoyed throughout this entire thing. And, like, you know that if Edmund was in charge of this and not Peter, I feel like this would all go much more smoothly, you know? Like, he knows when to take advice, but he also knows when to, like, be efficient, get done. And I just love that. Unfortunately, he does have one moment of, like, sexism, which I was like, Edmund, please no.
Stop it. Get some help.
But it's hard to avoid that in these books, and so I must accept it.
No. I'm gonna challenge you there. You do not have to accept it just because it's in this book. We can rightfully call Ed out for saying sexist remarks, and
No, I didn't mean accept it. I just meant that, like, sexism so pervades these books that, like, looking for a character to not have it in these books is impossible. So, like, yeah, at least his one line is retorted, and I really think he's shown so much character growth. I think you get such a clear picture of who he is, and I love him.
Aww. Especially considering that this was actually the second book C.S. wrote, given how much his character actually does develop, is pretty remarkable.
Oh, and there's this moment with Edmund that I want to bring up now. At the very end, they're having a feast, and, like, there's this loam that, like, the tree people are eating, and Edmund decides to try a piece of it, and I was like, Edmund, continuing his tradition of eating questionable foods. Character consistency.
Ed, you dumb man.
I love him so much. But yeah, the other thing I want to talk about that I think is good for us to check back in on is we brought up Bacchus. That was a reference that was made in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and we talked a lot in that book about, like, just references being dropped and not utilized. And Bacchus actually shows up here and does things. And so I wanted to, one, talk about that, and then two, chat a little bit about the other references I think are being made in this book. But I know you're not a fan of the Bacchus section. I'm also not a fan of the Bacchus section.
Yes, I did not like Bacchus because, as you said earlier, the Penfancies really don't have much impact on the sort of main plot of Caspian becoming king. And Bacchus has even less importance to the overall story. He shows up, and I think there are some, like, implications that he's doing some kind of orgy or something.
Oh, yeah.
A guide to modern life. Let's have an orgy.
When he first shows up, because, like, the girls talk about how they wouldn't want to be alone with him, which just very strange. But if you were to look at him as a character, I guess my main issue is, like, it literally could have been anyone doing this. Like, what made it unique to Bacchus? He doesn't really have a chance to talk. I'm not sure if he even has any spoken lines in this book. Somebody fact check me on that.
I think he maybe speaks once, but yeah.
Notwithstanding that, you never really get a chance for him to develop as a character. It basically operates, again, as a name drop that, in some ways, it's even worse than Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because it's just like, you're making this random reference, and he's playing a part in the story, but he's not playing a part that's unique to the character of Bacchus as a Greek god. It's just dumb. It's just really dumb. I guess he helps with the orgy at the beginning when he's first introduced, and then the orgy the sort of PG version of an orgy that happens at the end of the book. But other than that, it's just like, he's not relevant.
Yeah, and it's like, so I think the first people to arrive during Aslan's whole waking everyone up is Bacchus and Silenus. Has less to do, yeah. And they just kind of have a little romp. Like, literally, Bacchus's one line is he asks, "Is it a romp, Aslan?"
You're right.
They have a romp, and then they go and wake everyone up, and then they trample people.
Sounds like you guys are having a great party. Why wasn't I invited?
But it's like, yeah, did it need to be Bacchus as part of this romp? Is that, like, crucial and important? I mean, I guess he is, like, in terms of being a god, he is kind of the god of romping.
Yeah.
But, like, for a kid reading this, how is that relevant? You could have just had, like, the trees waking up and having a romp, and, like, it doesn't really make a difference.
And again, it's, as you were saying for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, of having introducing these characters that in Greek mythology were, like, in the case of the faun, was, like, a sexual predator. That's the background of fauns in Greek mythology. And so you introduce Bacchus, and the girls seem to allude to this, that, like, you wouldn't want to be alone with this guy. And so, like, CS seems to be aware of that, but that doesn't get addressed at all, you know?
Yeah. And then I think the whole scene that follows of them waking everything up is just kind of a landmine of, like, both weird references that don't fit, and also just, like, CS, again, inserting his anti-school agenda. And I did want to say, I had said there were no more animal transformations except for the one, and I was wrong, because Aslan does turn little schoolboys into pigs.
I don't get that either, because it's like, this doesn't make any sense, even just looking at this one book. That narratively and thematically makes no sense to transform the boys into pigs, because he nonetheless offers the Telmarines at the end the option to, like, you can either stay in this new regime or you can leave and go back to your original home. But, like, these boys, I guess they're jerks to their teacher, but that's it? They're not given a chance to, like, make a decision of themselves. I guess they just remain pigs, and not, like, talking pigs. I think, kind of like Rabadash's situation, they won't be able to talk. So they are just dumb pigs now.
I mean, hopefully they untransform and this was just, like, teaching a lesson, but it's still, like, not great. Rabadash at least did a lot of bad stuff. These boys were just, like, little jerks. Like, that's what little boys are.
Boys are so...
Right, and it just puts me in mind of, like, you know, if you compare this to, like, what Edmund did in the first book, it's like the structure of power and punishment, it doesn't make any sense. What is going on here, CS? What are you doing here? It's so inconsistent to the way justice is implemented in this book.
Indeed. And then I think I also wanted to touch on, because I'm sure people are like, yo, so this is a book in which the uncle kills the dad, takes the throne. So it's Hamlet.
Definitely
It's
Hamlet.
Hamlet.
It's all inspired by Hamlet, Morgan.
Hi, I'm Chiwetel Ejiofor,
And I'm Donald Glover.
and we'll be playing Lion King or Hamlet.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I'm not going to go on my full Hamlet rant, but, like, basically there are a lot of, like, medieval and Renaissance stories about, like, uncles being bad. It's a common trope. I think that's very deliberately being evoked, and I'm sure that Hamlet is one of the references being brought out. I also think there's a certain amount of this, and I think that will continue on a little bit into the next book, that is also somewhat reminiscent of Arthurian legend. You know, the true king kind of coming back to create another golden age. And also there's moments with Macbeth. I think we see at the end with, like, the trees coming to trample everyone. I was like, yes. What if the trees in Macbeth were actual trees? So I think it's interesting. I was really picking up on all of those notes this time.
The trees, like, you know, this is something we haven't really talked about too much yet, but, like, how much is C.S. Lewis just stealing from J.R.R. Tolkien? We have the Ents in this book, right? We have the magical rings in The Magician's Nephew. We have even the senses of, like, societies falling into corruption and decaying. That's definitely present throughout Lord of the Rings, and definitely the Silmarillion.
I mean, okay, I will defend. So dryads and naiads are like things in mythology.
But just the idea of the trees coming in to save the day, you know, I'm just saying, C.S. Lewis, maybe he's a hack. Maybe he just steals all of his ideas from better writers. I don't know. I'm just asking the hard questions here, okay?
I just think that C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, obviously as, like, buds and working in, like, the same academic community and all of that, they're drawing a lot on the same stockpile of references. And I'm not saying that C.S. Lewis isn't also making references to Lord of the Rings. I mean, he probably is, but, like, I feel like it's more that they're both drawing from the same source than that there's any particular correlation between the two, you know?
How do you think C.S. Lewis felt knowing that his best friend was a better writer than him?
Okay. I haven't reread Lord of the Rings in years, but I thought we agreed that, like, Tolkien is a better builder of worlds and builder of whatever, but that technically C.S. Lewis is a better writer.
When I say writer, I'm encompassing all the elements of writing, not just being able to describe scenery, where I think C.S. Lewis is definitely, that's his strong suit, but in terms of also storytelling, world building, developing themes. I mean, I'm sure at some point we're going to be rereading the Lord of the Rings books, but I'm just going to put it on the record that I think J.R.R. Tolkien is so much better at telling a story than C.S. Lewis is.
I think Tolkien is just a meticulous human being. You know what I mean? Like, I get that sense not only from, like, his works, but also from his, like, scholarship. I've read his, like, annotations of his translation of Beowulf, and, like, he went in. Like, he's a meticulous. It's really amazing and, like, very goal-worthy, and I very much admire him. I haven't read as much of C.S. Lewis's scholarship. The one I did read, I, like, strongly disagreed with, so that's probably coloring my opinion right now. But, like, I think that they're just such different, they operate so differently. And I do wonder, like, Clive and Tolkien had, like, you know, a falling out at some point, and, like, we're not friends anymore. I don't know how much the success of their respective fictional works played into it. I know religion was probably an element, but, like, I do feel a little bad because, like, I know Tolkien hated Chronicles of Narnia and was, like, upfront with Clive about that, which is valid. It's okay to dislike a work, but, like, you know, I feel bad for Clive.
I don't.
I don't know. I think Clive really supported Tolkien in his fictional works, and, like, Tolkien was just like, it trash. I don't like. And, like, poor Clive. Poor Clive.
Well, if you don't want to be called trash, write better stories. I do want to make the note that we've been talking now about JRR and CS, their buddy-buddy relationship. Now, I don't know, 5, 10, 800 minutes now. And I think that's just testament to how really boring this book is. There's really nothing to this book that's interesting to me. In a bigger sense of, like, there are moments, but there's no, like, big overarching thing. Not like The Magician's Nephew, where I can walk away from this thinking, oh, that's really interesting. That's going to be something I'm going to really ruminate on for the rest of the time.
I mean, even Horse and His Boy had the overarching theme of racism for us to comment on. Yeah. I really do think there's so many interesting small moments or concepts brought up, but like you said, there's not enough for us to really grapple with them because they're just kind of dropped in. Like, I mean, even the moment with, like, the Mraz's Telmarine lieutenants where they plot to, like, betray him and then blame it on the Narnians, and, like, there's, like, Game of Thrones intrigue going on, but it happens for 2 seconds and then it doesn't matter anymore.
It is so unsatisfying. Mraz is knocked over. His lieutenants or generals or whatever jump in, stab him. Mraz doesn't even have, like, any last words. It's just like, oh, Mraz is now dead. I guess that's that. There is, since we're being so scattershot, and I feel like it's really appropriate for this book, there is one moment that, like, that stood out to me where Trumpkin finally sees Aslan.
Yes!
And Aslan tells Trumpkin to approach, and then Aslan turns into Mama Cat, grabs Trumpkin, throws him in the air. Trumpkin is horrified by everything that's happening. And then Aslan asks a question that probably is only interesting to me. He asks, shall we be friends? And this, in my notes, got me on a whole rant about the evolution of how God is perceived in Christianity, because only in, like, the last 100 years or so has this idea of God being your friend or having a personal relationship with God or Jesus Christ manifested itself. Before then, God was, like, a really distant figure. And you saw that sort of in early Christianity, where there was this, especially Catholicism, where there's this hierarchy of, like, there was God, and then there are the saints, or the angels, then the saints, and then, you know, you get to the Pope and the cardinals and bishops and the priests. Even the act of, like, confessing to God, that was done through this intermediary of the priest, right? And so God was always a distant figure. And if you look at, like, I'm sorry, this is turning into a whole tangent. And that's sort of gradually shifted over the centuries as the idea of who God is became more humanized and more personified. And it's only in recent times that, like, it's really been humanized to the extent, like, God is your buddy, God is your pal kind of thing. And I'm just curious, like, is Aslan turning into a kitty for a second here? Is that tapping into that mindset of Jesus is a friend of mine kind of thinking? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's an interesting aspect to Aslan's character throughout the books where, like, I mean, I guess it's appropriate since he's God, but he is many things. And there's the idea of him, like, being terrible while also beautiful and all of those elements. What I wanted to find and see if we could have a comparison of is, like, you know, how Aslan dealt with, like, native Narnians versus the kids. And I'm not sure we really, like, see enough of that to be able to make judgment calls. Like, I was wondering if he's more lion-like with the native Narnians, but I don't think that's actually a thing. I mean, I guess it's interesting just the difference between how he deals with Susan versus Trumpkin. But it's also a difference of, like, Trumpkin has never believed in Aslan, and Susan has, and she falters. But, like, it's interesting, the question that he asks a question to both of them, and the question he asked to Susan is, are you brave again?
Which, the way he tries to make her brave again is by breathing on her. And like we've talked about this before about lion's breath and how it smells good and whatever. But it's just I do like the image of going up to a person and being like, "Hey, are you scared? I'll help you out." There you go. You're cured now of your fear.
Yep. It's a real power move by Aslan.
I feel like we're basically wrapping up at this point. But,
yeah, I think so.
But I want to reference my favorite line from this book. It's after Morass has been killed and like everything's descending into chaos and all the armies are getting ready to fight. Apparently Reepicheep jumps in and is like charging into battle. And Peter says, quote, "Come back, Reepicheep, you little ass."
Peter's a jerk.
It's such a funny moment of somebody yelling at a mouse to get back, "You little ass." I think I'm going to keep that one in. I know I've been censoring things up to this point, but it's just like, it's in the book, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think ass is so bad, so.
Ass is not so bad.
Oh my.
I feel so tempted to make a joke here, but I'm going to keep it relatively PG.
Let's not. I guess, do we want to end with the end of this book with the like revelation that the Telmarines are from our world and they were like pirates who like raped the native women? And...
Oh my god, yes, we can talk about it. Oh, this book is such a joke.
It's really just has the wildest turns in it. But I was like, wait, does this mean like is Caspian? I'm not sure where this island is that they come from in our world is supposed to be.
I've read that it's supposed to be somewhere in the South Pacific, but I don't know how people are pulling that information.
Right. In which case, the Telemarines are...
Why couldn't the 11-year-old get into the pirate movie? Right. It was rated R.
I mean, obviously, like, originally pirates that raped native women on an island that they got shipwrecked on and then stumbled through a hole to another world. But I was like, Caspian, not white.
So it said in the book that it's 6 couples that end up going from this island to the world of Narnia. I don't know if they then also, like, breeded with their own river gods or whatever. I don't know.
Or I guess the Archenlandians or the Color Men or someone.
The book does not say explicitly. It just says that they're pirates.
The point is, I'm headcanoning that Caspian is not white.
I think that makes sense, given just the geography of where they're supposed to be.
It's a very convoluted way to, like, make Caspian, like, legitimate on the throne. And I wish that instead Clive could have just been like, you know, these are, like, I don't understand why there had to be the thing about, like, our world and them coming from our world.
I was actually thinking about this. Like, what rights does Caspian have to the throne more than anyone else? You know, Morass, by all this logic, he's also a son of Adam. And then this idea of, like, well, what's to stop Caspian from making the same mistakes or doing the same things and subjugating the Narnians just like his ancestors did? It's just dumb. And there's even a point at the end of the book where Aslan asks him, "Hey, are you ready to rule?" And I think Caspian literally says, "No, I'm not. I'm just a kid." And Aslan responds, "Good. That means you're actually ready." And it's like, what?
Yeah, there's no critical discussion of the monarchy and whether that's a good thing, period. The system they have set up of who is allowed to rule. Weirdly enough, like, obviously at this point in England, like, the queen is not an actual political figure. You know, they've got the prime minister and parliament and all of that. Weirdly, no discussion of potentially having, like, a parliament to, like, help support him. there's really this book is not critically examining those issues, and yeah, the issue of the fact that Caspian's entire history is, his ancestors were first rapist pirates and then genocidal conquerors. He's allowed to be a good person. Like, good people can come from bad people. Like, you know what? There's no black and white, etc., etc. Caspian seems like he's okay. Maybe.
Who knows?
But, like, somehow, because he's human, and he's descended from humans that came from Earth, that is more of a thing to validate his right to rule than those other elements are to invalidate it.
It put me in mind of, like, the idea of reforming a system. Like, sometimes it makes sense to have somebody who is operating inside that system to correct the system. But sometimes trusting the person who has subjugated you for a millennium, trusting someone from that group to... It puts me in mind of, like, no, we don't need anyone else taking control. We can fix it. We got this. Like, it would have been cool to see a dwarf be like, you know what, actually, maybe a dwarf should be king. Or maybe a frickin' badger should be king. Because honey badgers don't take shit. I can't think of anyone better to run a country than a badger.
And I think that's a great place to end our discussion of this book. Truffle Hunter 2020.
All right, so, well, the next book is Voyage of the Dawn Treader. You reassured me about it, so now I'm a little excited about it, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I do think that this is potentially going to be one you like.
There is a meal on the line here.
There is a meal. I think you'll like it.
All right, the stakes have never been higher.
I also think it has the best ending of any Narnia book.
I mean, Magician's Nephew was a pretty damn fine
woman.
Damn fine ending.
I don't remember, like, the actual closing line, so I'm not gambling on that. I mean, like, the way it ends, I think, is the most fulfilling.
Well, only one way to find out, so until next week.
Excited? Yes.
Hasta la vista.
Reap a cheap out.